Hello guys, I'm Futureal. I stream 5 days a week over on twitch.tv/Futureal, and in this video we are taking a look at Diablo 4. We're going to discuss a lot of things about the playthrough, about the current systems in the game, and I'm going to explain to you why Diablo 4 is a pretty decent game. So, if you enjoyed the video, please hit me up with a like and a subscribe, and don't forget to leave your comment down below on your thoughts on Diablo 4. Until the next time, take care, and I will see you soon. There we go. Let's start talking about this. So we are doing this live on stream. We have the chat over here, guys. Say hi if you want to participate in the video. I'm doing it live because I want people in the chat to be able to bring up their points of view. You can read them in the chat there if you are interested in that. And I'm also going to open up for questions from the chat towards the end of the video, where they can bring up their concerns, their positive, their negatives, and we can try to get a cohesive video out of this whole thing. The first thing that we wanted to talk about is, I think it's hard to talk about Diablo 4 without mentioning Diablo 3 first. The main reason why a lot of people that were heavily invested in the Diablo franchise got alienated because of Diablo 3 didn't really have too much to do with the updated graphics or the systems. It was much more because that it didn't feel like a Diablo game. And it's kind of hard to explain what feels like a Diablo game means. But if you were a Diablo gamer, you started out with Diablo 1, you soiled your pants when you ran into the butcher the first time, you know what that means. The mood is extremely important. The ambiance, the music, the way that things look, it's going to have to be morbid, depressive, corpses, like stuff hanging off the walls in butcher hooks. Just to set the mood for a Diablo game is very, very important. Feeling like it's concerning to move forward. You're scared to open a door because you don't know what's on the other side. You hear screams in the distance. You see cauldrons of blood. The mood is what has made the Diablo franchise what it is. Starting out with Diablo 1. In Diablo 2, they carried on that and improved the graphics, made it a quicker gameplay with perpetual teleporting, for instance, many more classes. And so people that really, really loved how playing Diablo 2 and Diablo 1 felt, you get goosebumps on your arms, you're concerned to open doors, you're running around like a headless chicken if a boss comes running at you. The Smith is one in Diablo 2. The Butcher, Lister, the Tormentor in the Bale Wave can also be nasty if he's extra fast. This is something that failed a lot in Diablo 3, where things became almost trivial. It looked very cartoony. The cow level, don't even bring up the cow level, with unicorns and rainbows. It's an absolute assault on diehard fans of the Diablo franchise. So, I think personally that Diablo 3 would have been a good game. Let me rephrase that. It would have been a decent game if they called it something else than Diablo. If that game was called Dungeon Master 3000, I actually had a lot of fun when I played through the game the first time. I played it on release. I played it for about 10 days. So playing through the game was fun. It didn't feel like a Diablo game. So for me, Diablo game on release was like maybe a 6 or a 7 out of 10 game. It wouldn't get an 8 or a 9 because it didn't feel like a Diablo game. It was an okay game. What made the game fail completely later on was the other system. The end game, the auction house, all that kind of stuff. Anyways, we have talked enough about Diablo 3. Now, we're going to jump into Diablo 4 with my thoughts and hopefully the thoughts of some of the guys in the chat eventually. firstly, we have to determine how we are critiquing the game. This is very, very important because we have only played the beta from level 1 to 25. We haven't really seen endgame character power. We haven't seen endgame systems. We haven't seen how Paragon levels is going to affect the gameplay, how the seasonal play will be. So the way that I'm going to choose to look at this is more of a old school gamer type of view, which fits for me because I am an old school gamer. I played both Diablo 1 and Diablo 2. So we're going to play through, or we're going to critique the game for the purposes of beating the game with 5 characters. That's it. Nothing else. So starting each character individually, playing through the game, and beating the final boss. That's how we're going to critique the game. So if I don't touch upon things that are very closely related to endgame, that will be in a different video and in a completely different setting. So when we bring up the first subject here, you're going to start to understand why we're doing this the way that we're doing. So the cost of the game is something that has been brought up from time to time. I streamed both weekends of Diablo 4 content. There were people that came in and said that, oh, this is too much for a game. So let's think about that for a second. So the standard version of the game, which is the one that I purchased, is 70 euros, about $75, I think that would be the price, or $80, something around there, depending on the currency exchange. For a AAA title, if you look at the cost and what time you are intended to use for that amount of money. So let's say you're playing 5 characters and you're beating the game with 5 characters. Let's say you take 60, 70 hours. Let's say 15 hours of heavy pushing gameplay per character to get to max level and beat the final boss, right? Well, that's about €1 per hour of entertainment value. If you do that, if you beat the game with 5 characters and you put the game away, you got 60, 70, 80 hours of entertainment for 70 euros, which is about €1 per hour. Okay, now we can look at some of the other AAA titles over the last few years. Skyrim. How long does it take to beat Skyrim? Elden Ring, Game of the Year. How long does it take to beat Elden Ring? Subnautica. Games are 60, 70, 80 hours and they cost pretty much the same. I think the price is fine for a AAA title today. If you are intending to play the game at a seasonal level to get standing rankings in the standings, you will get a lot more money's worth, of course. But even for playing through the game 5 times and then putting the game away because the end game is not for you, I think the price is just fine. It's what you have to expect from a AAA title in 2023. So let's jump into talking about the actual game. So the first thing that I noticed was that when you create a character, and the character creation is absolutely amazing. I love the customization in this game. You can customize anything. You can choose male, female for every type of character or a character class, which is also very cool. You have some really cool features from hair, makeup, earrings, tattoos. There's a lot of stuff that you can customize. Absolutely love it. If there's one thing that I didn't see, is actually changing the girth of the character. So how thick is your character going to be? That was a little surprising that they didn't have. There's a lot of other games that do have that. So you can make your character leaner if you want to do that. You can make them bulkier if you want that. It's a little strange that that is not in the game, but it's not a very big deal. So you click start and the same cutscene plays, right? It plays for all characters. This is also, again, something that I would have enjoyed if, for instance, the Barbarian had a slightly different starting area than the Druid or than the Necromancer. It's not a big deal, but having a slightly different location would make each character feel a little bit more unique, even though the characters are very unique in their way that they're playing. For instance, you can draw a parallel to, for World of Warcraft, for instance, they have a different starting area for each race. So you could have had something different for all the characters in D4 as well. You can still could have like a circle around the starting town with like different alcoves, caves, for where these characters start, and they still end up going to the first city, all of them, and getting betrayed. So this is what we're going to talk about first. The first city, the first impression, how you are welcomed into the game, and what made me realize that Diablo 4 is actually starting to check off a lot of boxes of what it means to be a Diablo game. So you are running around in the wilderness, you arrive at the first city, you go to a house there, and you talk to three people inside, and end up going to a tavern where you receive your first quest. And by completion of this quest, the tavern keeper and the guests in there actually betray you and try to kill you. Basically, you get drugged, you get dragged off to a barn with corpses hanging down from the ceiling, guts hanging out, tons of blood, the body parts, very morbid. And just before the butcher, he's not the butcher, but he's a butcher, is about to kill you, a rabid priest comes running and bludgeons the guy to death and wakes you up. It's a very, very to the point, very morbid, very welcome to Diablo 4. I very much liked how they did that. The game is not designed to be pretty. The game is designed to create emotions, to make you feel. You get this eerie feeling with the music and the sound effects and the ambiance in the game. It's really, really good. And by being welcomed this way into the game, I think it captures a very important part of what it means to be a Diablo game. From there, let's talk about some of the outdoor areas. So there is a aspect of MMO being integrated in Diablo 4 where you can see other players run around in your area. It's a sharded game, which means that you're not going to have tens of thousands of people on release in the same area. So basically, it's different layers. So you are gonna interact with some people while you're running around in the wilderness. However, what I want to say is that I have played a lot of World of Warcraft. So when people went from Diablo 2 to Diablo 3 to Diablo 4, I went from Diablo 2 to World of Warcraft. I didn't play Diablo 3 very much at all because I didn't enjoy it. So I'm very familiar with this outdoor MMO style of play. And I actually liked how they did that in Diablo, because they have kind of created a MMO aspect without it being too powerful, too empowering, too overwhelming. You're not going to run into hundreds of people, as I said. You're going to run into a few. And it's fine, because the outdoor content is not intended to be extremely impactful. If any of you are World of Warcraft players, you remember yourself that if you are going from city A to city B, you're going to run into creatures that are indigenous to the zone you're in, but they're not very impactful. They're basically like trash creatures, right? They don't have anything. Yes, there might be an initial quest to get some experience, blah, 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 but it's not very impactful content. It's like a transport leg. So you're going from city A to city B, that's your quest, and you're going to get more quests in that city. But what you interact with in between is it's content, but it's not very significant, meaning that the majority of the high-end content is going to happen in dungeons, which is something that I actually like, because that feels exclusive. And we're talking about the world boss. They're going to be there's a world boss. There probably will be more world bosses, but again, if you draw parallels to World of Warcraft, you're going to realize very quickly that world bosses are, it's like an entry level to get a little bit better gear. It's not very impactful for the absolute end game playing, right? So I think that's also completely fine. I played to some 20, 22, 23 level. I can't remember exactly with a druid. I played all 5 characters. I ended with playing a druid, so we played that one the most. I think that I wanted to give the outdoor sort of... It's difficult to say because I only got to see like 4 or 5 zones. I didn't get to see everything because the map is quite big. But I think I wanted to give the outdoor feel somewhere between a 6 and a 7 out of 10. It was fine. And for me, that's where we transition into dungeons. And I think the dungeons were absolutely amazing. The dungeon design is great. The way it feels to play is great. It's not too fast. And by that, I mean, we're playing an ARPG, right? We're not playing a hack and slash. I think a lot of people that are used to Diablo 3, they want to do this charge up skill, clear the room. Charge up skill, clear the room. Just dashing through the entire dungeon and just murdering tens of thousands of creatures. That's not really what an ARPG is about. So if you look at Diablo 1, there was never a really super high density in that game, but the creatures were more impactful. They were dangerous. Same thing in Diablo 2. There are areas that have more or less density. Of course there is. That's going to be the same thing in Diablo 4. But I don't feel like there was nothing wrong with the density in the dungeons that I did. I did the majority of the dungeons, some of them multiple times, and I enjoyed the dungeon content very, very much. Particularly the ambience, the music, the design of the dungeons, how they played with perspective and 3D. So like when you came around the corner, you could see down a tunnel, and there was some light in the tunnel, and then you saw the stalagmites from the roof create this crazy 3D effect while you were running around in the dungeon. It was very well made. We haven't seen the high-end dungeons, of course. We only have seen the dungeons up to level 25. But I feel like the dungeon content was really, really good. I'm willing to give the dungeon content almost an 8 out of 10. It was, for me, the most entertaining part of the game by far. So let's talk a little bit about difficulty. So the characters that I created on the veteran setting. I didn't have too much trouble. Of course, the Barb and the Druid, they were tougher to play. But most characters could get through the veteran stage with any issues. As far as I understand, there's going to be more difficulties. I think it's a good thing that we have more difficulties on the playthrough stage, because then people that are really good at the game, they can turn up the difficulty and make it challenging, and also be rewarded by a bit of a faster playthrough. And people that are completely new, they can make it easier for them, and they will enjoy the playthrough in a more pleasant way for them. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I do, however, question the amount of difficulty at max level. Also coming from World of Warcraft high-end rating, one of the biggest critiques to World of Warcraft in the long run was that there was so many difficulties at max level. It was almost impossible to find people because they were spread out on all these difficulties instead of making it normal and difficult. You can call it different things, but normal difficulty and difficult difficulty should be enough. And then you tune those two to what you are intending to do. Because when you're having a ton of difficulties, it becomes a little, it feels almost arbitrary in a way. So I'm not so sure how that's going to play off when the end game comes live, but we are not going to really put much emphasis on that now in this video. So for the purposes of playing through the video or playing through the game, having 4 difficulties, what is it? Normal, Veteran, Hell, and Inferno. I'm not entirely sure when and how you can activate those different difficulties, but we will see how that works out. I think 4 is fine for that purpose. One thing that I did like about the playthrough, that also might end up being a huge problem in the end game, was how items looked when I got them. So there was nothing this like 2,000 dexterity, 9,000 strength, 400% this, 600% this. It was very much like +1 to stats, +2 to stats, +1 to wolves, 2% cooldown reduction. Like very small values. What I do, however, fear is that when you get to the absolute end game, these items are going to be completely out of control, similar to what it is in Diablo 3. Something that also deterred me a lot from playing the game, because I don't want to shoot my bow and do 50 trillion damage. Nobody can fathom what that means. I want to do 1,000 damage, because I know what 1,000 is. I can picture 1,000 in my head and it would make sense. When you see damages in the hundreds of the millions and the trillions, it makes the entire amount of damage arbitrary. There is a way, I think, without being 100% sure, that if this is the case, you can simply remove the scrolling combat text. And that would actually be more enjoyable. Because seeing these silly numbers actually takes away from me. It takes away from the feeling, because I'm getting annoyed by seeing 100 trillion pop up on the screen. So again, that's an end game thing, and we're not going to put much time invested in that discussion right here, because this is not an end game video. So I wanted to commend them for the items and how they are designed in the early game. I think it's good. Small values, easy to fathom, easy to wrap your head around what things do, because they're not ridiculous. Spells are a little different. This comes into the same discussion as character power, because there is a big discrepancy in the character power at the moment. I think you can firmly say that the Necromancer with a kind of, I can't remember the spell name, but Blood Nova with Corpse Explosion build is kind of insane. I played that on the first day. Well, I played like a homemade version of it, and then I found out later that others were doing something similar, and they found another way of building it that was even more ridiculous. Ranged character Sorceress is definitely the second strongest character when it comes to character power. Rogue is third, Barb is fourth, and I think the Druid is the weakest. But also remember that both the Barb and the Druid, they didn't have their specialties available, so they would be extra difficult on the beta that we have just played. So I'm assuming that both Barb and the Druid will become stronger when they have their specialties available to them. I do, however, question how will this Blood Nova Corpse Explosion build for the Necromancer work. You had builds for the Sorceress as well. There was a Frozen Orb build that you can get an item that it shot 2 Frozen Orbs. You can make the Frozen Orb stand still to increase damage, so it worked like a Nova ability away from your character. It's difficult. I'm skeptical, I have to say, about particularly the Necromancer and the Sorceress power, because they are ridiculous at the moment. The Rogue felt fine, and I think the Druid and the Barb are a bit weak, but you know, the specialty thing that we just talked about comes into play there. Whereas we need to see what that's like when the specialties become available on live servers. So I think I will rank them as of power: Necromancer strongest, Sorceress second, Rogue third, Barb fourth, and the Druid is probably the weakest one. However, this is pretty much turned upside down if you look at the entertainment value. I absolutely loved playing the Druid. It was difficult, it was slow, but it felt very rewarding. very rewarding. Reading through the talent trees, finding abilities that you could spec into to be able to beat this boss and that boss. It was a lot of fun. For me, the druid was by far the most interesting character to play. And the bard was second for the same reason. It was difficult. You had to play the mechanics of the fights. If you didn't play the mechanics of the fights, you got murdered. So you have to avoid the shit on the ground, run away from the cone attacks, kite out the boss when he has a damage buff, stun the boss when he's doing a wild ability. Like, you have to actually play mechanics. You can't just stand there and shoot. And this is... I felt that was kind of the case with both the Necromancer and the Sorceress. It was a bit too face-rolly for my liking. Very powerful, but I do like a little bit more of a challenge when I play a game like this. So I'm going to rank it like this. Most fun for me was the Druid, followed by Barb, Rogue, then Sorceress. No, actually, not Sorceress. Necromancer was more fun than the Sorceress. I think the Sorcerer was the least fun of all the characters, for me personally. Not taking the character power into account, of course. So, we're going to talk about a few things. And this is one thing that I noticed myself. I actually asked my chat when we were playing this game, is this really it? And it has to do with keybinds. I couldn't find any way to bind more than 6 keys. And having keys bound to your mouse when you're clicking around on the map, and when you're just dragging the map over other creatures, it will cast the ability when you don't mean to cast the ability. You mean to move, but then a creature runs into your mouse pointer. Yeah, you can complain, get better at the game, blah blah blah, but that's always going to happen eventually. You can't click around on the map, kiting on whatever you're doing, and not accidentally cast your left mouse button key. That's gonna happen. So I think having only 6, arguably 5 keybinds, because you can only really bind the right click on the mouse, unless you have some arbitrary ability on left click. I think you need more. Doesn't necessarily have to be on the graphic, but I really do think and hope that they will add more than 5/6 hotkeys on the game. It did feel like I needed more, particularly on the Druid, because you have a lot of shape-shifting abilities and stuff like that you need to use. Another thing was the fact that you couldn't open the map and move at the same time. So one of the things that are very good that people remember from Diablo 2 is the fact that you can have a faded out map. So you can open a map on top of your game, and you can actually see the map in a faded version, faded variety, while still moving. So you can be running forward, open the map, you can see where you're going, while you are continuing to run, and then remove the map again to, adjust yourself so you go the correct way. Something like that would be nice. I don't really like the fact that I can't see what's going on with my character when I open the map. They could be creatures, they could be whatever next to my character, and I cannot see it, which I hope that's changed. Another thing, and this one is really bad. Like this is probably the worst one of them all. And I have a gentleman in my channel that plays the game on a ultra-wide monitor. And your screen size actually allows you to play the character in a different way. So if I try to explain what I mean, if you're playing on an ultra-wide monitor, you will see more area outside of what I, on my normal 16:9 monitor, would see. Meaning that he can teleport further than me. Or he can put abilities further away from his character than what I can do. And that's not okay. That will create a very, very unfair advantage based on the hardware that you're playing. And that shit is not okay. There has to be a max range that you can put down your spells. You cannot get an advantage from playing on an ultra-wide monitor. That is just silly. Sure, you want to see more? I get it. But you can't allow people to teleport twice the distance. That is just ridiculous. That has to be fixed. hands down the worst interaction that I've come across on this beta test. That being said, let's talk about some common critiques. So I've streamed this game, let's say, about 30 hours. We played all 5 characters about 30 hours, something like this, 25, 30 hours. And one of the most common critiques is, for instance, scaling levels. So I'm a fan of scaling levels. I'm going to try to explain to you why, because I think the argument for thinking scaling levels is bad is it doesn't hold water. I think scaling levels is amazing because it creates opportunity for every gamer to play through the game in the manner of how they want to do it. So if they don't like this zone, or if that zone is their favorite, they can go there and do the quests. And they can completely skip a different one because they didn't like that, or they want to save that one for later because they enjoyed it more. And the most common argument for it is that it doesn't feel like your character gets any stronger. Well, this is completely untrue, because your character gets stronger by better gear and more abilities. If you mean that it doesn't feel like your character is face rolly, well, maybe your character shouldn't be face rolly. Maybe you should actually struggle playing through the game because it's a better experience. If you want to compare it to a game like Diablo 2, which I'm very familiar with, I don't know how many of you actually remember these things, but for instance, if you run into the Bloodmoor in Diablo 2, it has an area level. Every monster is scaled to the area level. Okay, let's say you kill 10 of them and you go to the next zone. Okay, so now you're level 2. Cold Plains has a different area level, so the monsters have slightly higher level. Okay, so you kill 30, 40 monsters, and now you go to the next level, or the next zone, which is the Stony Field, and now that one has a different area level. So just because there isn't a dynamic scaling like there is now in Diablo 4, there's still scaling. If you play through Diablo 2 in the manner that it's intended, basically you create a character, you play through the game, do all the quests, and beat Baal on Hell, you're going to end up being like level 82, 83, 84, something like this. And the area level is 85. So you are going to be very close to the area level the whole way, because you're doing the quests and you're getting the intended experience before you move on to the next difficulty, so on and so forth. So that means that there is scaling. It scales with you. It's not going to be absolutely 100% accurate to your character level, but I would say it's going to be about plus minus 2 levels on the area level. So by setting the area level to your level and a dynamic scaling, it's exactly the same thing. It doesn't change anything. It's just that it gives you the opportunity as a player to go to the zone that you like, or you can skip the zone that you don't like, or you can say like to a friend, we can do this zone together because we haven't done it. Your friend is level 16, you're level 40. You can do the zone together because you started at different times, so you have a friend who can play less, blah, blah, blah. It creates so much more opportunity to construct your own way of playing through the game. So I think it's absolutely fantastic that they have done this. And I'm trying to explain as well as I can why it's a good thing. And the D2 comparison is the best I can do because I know so much about D2. Scaling exists in any game like this. It's the same if you look at classic World of Warcraft. Every zone you went into had a higher area level. If you went through the game the way it was intended, well, you constantly had the area level that was very close to your own level. The bad thing is because you weren't able to, well, I mean, if you have scaling level, there's one thing you can do, and that's skip far ahead and feel like the game is getting more difficult. So, for instance, you can't go to a level that is 10 levels above you and start killing stuff, but you couldn't really do that anyway. It wouldn't be any point. And it's also, if you want to make the argumentation that scaling levels is bad because you want to make things arbitrarily difficult for yourself, or you want to speedrun the game, well, I'm sorry, you are not the target audience for what the game is meant for. 98% of players will do a linear playthrough of the game. So that's what they have to do. They have to optimize the game for those who are playing the game the way it was intended. If you want to create own incentives for yourself on how you want to beat the game or how you want to progress, you're going to have to handle the systems that are in play. Because the game is not meant to be broken. So this is also why if you look at Diablo 2, speedrunners, there's many of them, I'm not going to mention them here, you probably know the majority of them yourself, they beat Hell Baal at level 62, which is the lowest level you can be without glitching it. So the lowest solo defeat on Baal Hell is level 62. You will be more than that if you play through the game the way that it's intended. The only way you can beat the game that early is by utilizing your knowledge to over-level on a different difficulty and then running away from the monsters without killing them. That's only the way you can do it. So I think, all in all, there is much more benefits from scaling levels that they are negatives. That's the last thing we're going to do about that one. So we have another one here, another common critique. The game looks like D3, or Lost Ark, or Path of Exile. That's the one that I've heard a few times. What do you expect a modern ARPG to look like? It's not going to look like Diablo 2. Are they going to invent a new way of ARPGing? I think that's bizarre. Because the funny thing is that you can also say that, well, Lost Ark and D3 and Path of Exile looks like Diablo 2 with better graphics. Plays a little different. So I think, like, claiming that the game loses quality because it looks like Lost Ark or D3 or PoE is absolutely ludicrous. Do you throw a fit when FIFA 23 looks like FIFA 22? No, you don't. Do you throw a fit when BMW releases a new car and it looked like the previous one? No, you don't. Like, there is a framework of what an ARPG means. It has to be within that. You can't go something completely crazy. So I think that by saying that the game looks like D3, Lost Ark, PoE, you're completely not looking at how the game really looks. Because the character in the center of the screen with a mouse pointer and a click to move, those are three things that kind of have to be there. That's what an ARPG means. Okay, so now you have buttons. So what is that? You choose your skill based on a hotkey on a keyboard. But if you look at it even deeper, look at what the game actually looks like. Look at some of the dungeons. Do any of the dungeons in Diablo 3 have corpses falling out of them? Or tentacles moving around, rotting garbage falling down from everywhere? To me, it doesn't look like D3 at all. It's almost as saying like one human being looks like the other one because they're both human beings. Yeah, of course they are. They're both video games. They're both action RPG games. But what you're actually looking at doesn't look the same. So I'm really unsure what people mean when they say that. Because to me, the games doesn't look the same at all. I think there's a huge difference. Within the framework of action RPGs, the only thing you can change is the textures and the graphics. The game is gonna play very similarly. And I think that a very good thing that they did in Diablo 4 is that they toned back the speed. Because I think D3 is a bit towards the hack and slash side, more like PoE. It's very fast gameplay, which means you have this charge up skill, kill the room, charge up skill, kill the room kind of gameplay. And I don't think that fits in an ARPG reference back to D1 and D2. where the gameplay is actually fairly slow, because that's what an ARPG is supposed to be. It's not a hack and slash. This goes into the last category that I'm going to talk about before we are going to take questions from the chat. I can see that you guys have been talking a lot while I have been doing this video, guys, and that's good. Discuss between you what you feel. Everyone is entitled to their opinion as long as you're not being vile. So let me talk about the last thing we talked about here, and it is a perfect extension of what we just talked about, monster density. So there has been some people, and I'm not trying to out anyone or make fun of anyone, but people that complain about low monster density are people that have played Diablo 3 in the end game, and there's people that have played Path of Exile. There's nothing wrong with the monster density whatsoever. Monster density in Diablo 4 dungeons are completely fine. It's not supposed to be overdense. It's going to be less monsters, but more meaningful monsters. So instead of having 300 monsters that you kill with one ability, you now have 6 monsters, or 8 monsters, or 10 monsters. I think that is a much better way of designing it than making it overflowing with creatures and that you're just zerging through, because it turns the game into a hack and slash instead of an action RPG. So I'm going to grade the game now myself before we jump into the chat with the guys here and try to take some questions or some opinions from the chat that I will read. So as I said before, I think the outdoor content looks between like a 6 and a 7. And for me, the dungeons, they're a clear 8. So overall, I think we're looking at approximately a 7.5 out of 10. Keep in mind that we haven't seen the end game. But if you want to buy this game, it's going to be 70 euros. You're going to have 50 to 100 hours of solid entertainment playing through the game with all 5 characters. If the end game is not for you, that's okay. Put the game away. You have gotten good value for your money. It's a great game to play through from what I have seen. So if you don't engage in the end game, that's fine. You can put the game away and be happy that you have gotten a good solid 100 hours of entertainment out of it. We are going to talk about the end game systems in another video, so if you are interested in that, hang on to this channel. Make sure that you click the follow button or the subscribe button underneath. But now we're going to take some questions and some viewpoints from the chat. So I'm going to turn around a bit, and I'm going to start reading some chat here. So what do you guys think in the channel here? Maybe you have questions to something of the things that I have said. Maybe you have points that you want to bring up that I didn't cover. So the stage is clear, guys. Whoever wants to speak, you can just post questions here and I will try to read them. What do I think about the end? What do I think the end game will feel like based on my experience of the early game? I have to be honest. I don't necessarily, for me, think that the end game is gonna be very different from Diablo 3. It's not gonna be very different. You're gonna have seasonal play. I think the itemization is gonna be very much thousands of percentage of damage. I think the numbers are gonna get ridiculous. Like, this is of course speculation from my side, but I haven't seen anything that makes me think that they're gonna go away from these systems. And particularly when you have seasonal play, you need kind of a fast pace to get through it, which means that they have to cater to more casual people. So it depends all what Blizzard want, right? If Blizzard intends your character to be fully geared after 25 hours of gameplay, for a casual player, that is a month. And having a fully geared character in a month is fine. Maybe even shorter, maybe in 3 weeks. But 25 hours is 2 days for a hardcore player. I'm not saying hardcore difficulty, but someone who's very invested in the game, 25 hours, 2 days. And then we are very much back to the whole D3 paradigm where a season resets on Friday, and on Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, the season is pretty much over. Again, speculation, and there's some information in chat here as well, that damage numbers are starting to get ridiculous. But that's going to be covered in a late game video that we're going to do later when we have actually seen how these systems will work in the end game. Let's see if we can find another question here. Also, if you don't like the playthrough but you like the end game, they will let you skip it. I'm not entirely sure what that comment means, Paul. Is there a skip content ability once you have leveled once? Trading isn't really part of the playthrough, though, Hamet. But I think trading will be fine. There is a problem with trading in these games, and that is because as soon as you allow trading, people are gonna bot, and they're not gonna bot like there's not gonna be a sweaty guy in a basement with one bot sitting there and stroking the salmon over the items that the bot found overnight. That's an issue, but it's a very, very small issue. That's like making wine in your basement and selling it. It's not going to amount to anything. It's not going to be a problem. The problem occurs when someone does it at an industrial level. And if you have free trading of endgame best in slot items, you're going to have a enormous amount of bots and illegal RMT trading. I can refer to Diablo 2. We don't need to mention this abomination of a website, but it completely runs the economy. It ruins the game for the vast majority of people. And this is the pros and cons that Blizzard as a gaming company have to weigh up against each other. So are you going to make items so arbitrary that they drop so often that they have no trade value? Well, you can. That was pretty much Diablo 3. Are you going to make items personal loot and without trading at all? Well, the problem then is that you're going to have an enormous amount of drops. Because then we're back to how long are you intended to play the game to have a fully geared character? Well, let's say, for the sake of argument, 25 hours. Well, we have the same time frame as before. Whilst a casual player can do that in a month and be happy that he did that in the season, a more invested player would have that in 2 days. So the season is over in 2 days. Because you have to have a really fast-paced amount of drops for the casual players to enjoy the game. And there's a lot more casual players than heavily invested players, and that means that it's the casual players that pay the bills. If you don't cater to casual people, you're not going to make money. That's the paradox we're living in. So by making the game technically worse for the average heavily invested player, more people will play it. So that's what you have, right? So you either have to make it completely solo self-found, and then make items difficult to get to make it be rewarding. The problem is that then casual players won't play it. It's too time investing. Like it requires too much time investment. Same as Diablo 2, right? A lot of people that are playing Diablo 2 at a casual level, they end up buying items RMT because they don't have time to farm the items themselves. So if they want to have a good geared character, there's no choice. They can't play 10 hours a day for 2 weeks to get the stuff that they need this season. So they end up being provided for by bots, and they buy the items RMT instead. Is that a good way? No, it's not. So it's super difficult to find the correct balance. And I think Blizzard they're trying. I think it's a good idea what they have tried. It's going to be interesting to see how it works out, because the way that it works now is that rare items, or yellow items if you wish, are tradable. And the way you're supposed to do it, the best in slot items are no longer legendaries. They are rare items that are infused with a legendary ability. So you as a personal player are supposed to go and find a bunch of legendaries that have the legendary ability that you need and harness this ability, and then find a rare item with the correct stats for your build, and then you put that legendary ability on the item, and this item now becomes best in slot, and it becomes personalized, and it becomes unique. So you cannot trade it. So you can't trade best in slot items. Now, is the difficulty to get these legendary items that you can extract these abilities from to put on the rare item? Are those going to be rare enough for this to actually matter? Or will the rare items actually work in practice like best in slot uniques did in Diablo 2, for instance? If that's the case, well, then the system failed. It's a lot of time up and forward before we can see how that turns out. But they are trying. So they're trying new systems. We don't know if it's going to work yet, but let's just see how that turns out. Do we have anything more here? Any more comments, guys? Any more questions? Do you have any input on anything that we have talked about in the last 30 minutes? Okay, Mitchell is banned. Mitchell is banned. What is the real consequence of people botting? Okay, the real consequence of people botting is that the trade market gets destroyed, right? So let's for the sake of argument say that that you're botting, right? And I'm not saying that you have one old computer running one Diablo 2 account next to your bed and you check the loot every morning. That's not botting. Well, it is, but that's not what I'm referring to. I'm referring to people that run 10,000 accounts, right? So if you run 10,000 bots in Diablo 2, how many Shakos are you going to find every night? 200? Something like this? Just doing Mephisto runs. So that means on day 3 of the ladder, you have now injected 200 Shakos into the economy, completely destroying the price for the Shako that I found while I grinded Mephisto for 15 hours manually. That's a problem. So if I don't get rewarded for the time that I put into the game by being able to get a decent price for the items that I find, then, you know, it's a problem that they're crashing the economy. So only after like 5 or 6 days, right? The only thing that's worth anything is items that are 100% perfect or runes. That's it. And that's why a seasonal play in Diablo 2 Resurrected at the moment actually feels quite bad to play. Because nothing is worth anything. So you have to find perfect items or you have to find raw runes. That's it. That's your options. Nothing else. After 3 or 4 days, nothing else is worth anything. So that's the problem with having an insane amount of bots. Do I think non-item trading will be a issue like gold, materials, and etc.? I don't know, actually. I don't actually know how valuable gold and crafting materials will be. I'm completely oblivious, and you know, that's it's going to depend on how impactful these things will be in the end game. So obviously, any kind of game currency has some kind of value, right? But if the value becomes borderline obsolete, it's both good and bad, because now it can't be botted for any value, but also it's not worth anything for people that get it the fair way. So again, it's really difficult to put your game in a way that casual players will feel rewarded for what they do in the game, but at the same time, you can't exploit that by taking advantage of the system. Really difficult. Do I think the replayability suffers when your playthrough takes already a very long time? Well, it depends on the game. So as you guys know, I have been playing Elden Ring as my variety game. And Elden Ring is a fantastic game. It's a very difficult game. And particularly for someone who has never played a Soul game before and I haven't used a controller in 20 years. And I was playing the game, I was struggling and I was messing around and making a lot of mistakes. And, you know, as I was slowly advancing through the game, more and more people came to my chat and they're like, oh, it's so fun to watch you have a struggle with this game and you know, see how someone who is completely new to this game approaches it, and, you know, see the skill level increase, and you feel that you get more comfortable with the game. And they actually go back and play the game. People that have played the game numerous times, they still come back and they play the game with a different character. That's what replayability is all about. And Elden Ring is a 100-hour game. Right? Elden Ring is a big game. It's a lot of side content. So unless you are absolutely extraordinarily skilled at Elden Ring, that's going to be a solid 60-hour playthrough to do a new character. So I don't think that replayability suffers if the playthrough is longer. It all depends on the game. It all depends on how they design the game. Let's take a look here. Blizzard needs to get better at banning bots. This is a recurring argumentation, and I agree. They are banning bots, but it's like, first of all, let me just say, it's impossible to stop bots completely. 100% impossible. Any game in the world is gonna get botted, more or less. Or to a bigger or smaller like, you can't stop it. Bots are getting so advanced with delayed input, so it mimics a player sitting there, and they can have 10 bots and then bot for 2 hours on each of them to like rotate the amount of time each account is logged in. It's impossible to stop bots. Absolutely impossible. You can have the best warden system in the world, you can't stop it. However, you can limit it. And I think that Blizzard is. They definitely they are limiting the amount of bots, but we will always be arguing that they should do more and that we want more of these bots stopped. Let me see here. Build variety counts for a lot. Absolutely. Absolutely. Build variety is also an incentive for playing through the game multiple times. And I think that from what I have seen in Diablo 4, I think even if the end game ends up being kind of meh, which we don't know yet, not saying it will, not yet anyway, there is so many build opportunities in the skill trees that you do have a very good incentive of playing through the game. And I think that so far is looking pretty good. Have they not made it not worth botting? I mean, that depends how you look at it, Broken. Because if gold is going to be valuable, and if trading materials is going to be valuable, they will just bot a character up to max level and then bot some heavy zones right afterwards for rare items, for like high-end rare items, for trading crafting materials for gold. You think I'm overestimating how many bots there will be with $70? How much was Diablo 2 Resurrected? How much was Diablo 2 Resurrected? How much is World of Warcraft? World of Warcraft is $70 for, what is it, 5 months? In addition to the cost of the game. Yeah, there's tens of thousands of bots on Diablo 2 Resurrected. There's arguably hundreds of thousands of bots on World of Warcraft. Billions? That's a bit rich, YOLO. I'm gonna go ahead and say that's not the case. but the thing is, the cost doesn't matter. The cost is irrelevant because they're making back more than the accounts cost over time. So that's irrelevant in this case. Well, if we don't have any more viewpoints or any more questions from the chat, there were some streamers that paid for their loot. I'm not entirely sure what you are referring to, Hamid. Could you elaborate? Well, I mean, a regular dude can't be running thousands of bots. Like, that was never the case, though. That was never the case. So any like private person could probably not maintain more than like 5 to 10 bots. It's just too much time. But like if you go into on an industrial level, when you have computer programs that take care of the bots, they even sell the items automatically. Then you need more computers, you need better hardware, you need probably coding experience. Yeah, you need bots to take care of the bots, basically. Can you write out a cohesive sentence, Hamid? Because what you're saying doesn't make sense. The worst is when you streamers that paid for their loot with giveaways. Are you talking about when streamers are having giveaways and giving away items to people? Oh, okay. I understand what you mean now. I understand what you mean, and I absolutely agree. When people, particularly people that are streaming for a community or they're showcasing a game, gets given items that are clearly cheated, bought from RMT sites or botted, and they get these given to them and they accept them for virtually no value, it is very damaging for the community. Because I feel like we as content creators, if we want it or not, we have a responsibility to keep the community healthy. That's my impression and my opinion, because if you have a large following, people are going to side with you and your behavior because they like you. In the vast majority of cases, the majority of the viewers will do that. So we're not talking about anyone specific. What I'm saying is, if you are a person that says, I don't want the responsibility, don't look at me because I'm doing certain things that are not good, well, that's horseshit. You have a responsibility if you're a content creator, no matter if you want it or not, because you have a following. So you have a responsibility to treat the community fairly and to be a good example for the rest of the community. It is just the way it is. And if you promote toxic behavior, in your content, well, then you're gonna make the community more toxic. It's just the way it is, because people are gonna follow their favorite content creators. That's basically my view. I mean, let's not bring up anyone in particular here, guys. We're not making this video to out someone. There's tons of people that are doing different things for different reasons. I have no agenda against anyone. I have my opinion, and I live by that opinion myself. I'm trying to promote a healthy community for me and the content that I make on Twitch and on YouTube. So I can only say what I feel about it and what I'm intending to do. So let's not go after anyone. That's not how I want this video to turn out. I think that would be unfair for those who are unfortunate enough to get mentioned. But I think that's going to conclude this Diablo 4 video. We're going to do a quick TLDR recap. I think the game is a solid improvement from Diablo 3. It has gone back from the cartoony, very happy unicorn rainbow kind of style game that D3 is, which is kind of why D3 for the majority of the Diablo community failed. And it has gone back to a morbid, eerie, more nasty type of ARPG, which is something that a lot of the community, I think, will enjoy if they give the game a chance. I think also a lot of people are negative to the game because they are jumping directly from the starting point to the end game. So they want the end game to be super good, and they don't take into consideration the journey to get there. For a lot of people, particularly more old school gamers like myself and many here in the chat, the journey through the game is just as important or even more important than the end game. So that's why we have made this video without any regard for the end game whatsoever. That video will come later. And at the actual final end, I will give the game a 7.5 out of 10 for a score. And I hope that you will enjoy the game if you choose to buy it. I hope that I will see you in the game. Come and check us out on twitch.tv/Futureal and leave some comments in the chat. We will appreciate that. Until the next D4 video, guys, take care of yourselves. Be sure to check out more content from Diablo 4 and other content on my channel. Until next time, I'll see you soon.